Hi Bricks and welcome to the fourth episode of Brick Talks. In today's video I'll talk about a certain issue I've had with Rocket League, and that's about one of the playlists. You've probably already guessed which. It's solo standard. But why? Well, basically the playlist is pretty dead. I checked the playlists a bunch of times to make sure I wasn't mistaken, and solo standard were constantly among the least played playlists, only occasionally contested by Snow Day, Hoops, and Dropshot. I found a Reddit post as well, which had documented regular checks and showed solo standard as the second least played game mode. There's even written an article about killing off solo standard on the Forbes website. But why is solo standard an issue, especially when there's some extra modes with just as few players as solo standard? Well, I found two reasons why solo standard in particular is an issue. First of all, and in my opinion the biggest reason, is that solo standard inherently has the longest queue time of any playlist because of its restriction to solo queuing. That means that you'll need 6 individual searches to find a game in solo standard. In any other game mode, the amount of searches can be as little as 2. If solo queuing, this number will be 3 instead. This is obviously a simplification, as there's a bunch of other different factors going into matchmaking, but the nature of solo standard is making it harder to find games with equal amount of players in the playlists. Secondly, there's a bunch of community organizations supporting the extra mode playlists. For Hoops, there's Ranked Hoops. For Dropshot, there's Ranked Dropshot. And for Snow Day, there's the Rocket Hockey League. There's no such community movement behind solo standard. The most unified answer I've seen across platforms about solo standard is that it's the playlist I play when I don't really want to play seriously, but I can't be bothered going into casual 3v3. That doesn't seem like a healthy competitive playlist. Why does it really matter? Why not just leave the playlist alone and let it be? It doesn't really hurt anything, does it? Well, yes, it kinda does. You can make a case for it hurting the game directly by taking players from other game modes and funneling them into this playlist where there's a ridiculously longer queue time in any of the other playlists. But that's not really gonna be my case. I wanna focus on the indirect costs that this playlist brings to the table. Basically, Psyonix seems really content with their current playlist system where they have 4 playlists in these 3 different tabs. We have the casual, the competitive, and the extra modes. There's definitely some flaws around this design, especially because you can't cure both extra modes and competitive modes at the same time. This annoys me a lot, but I've learned to deal with that. But considering that Psyonix really hasn't changed this format in God knows how long, I don't see them changing it anytime soon either, which means we're not gonna see any new competitive modes. And this is where I feel like this video is really interesting. What if we replaced solo standard with a new competitive mode? That's really the question I want to ask in this video. So I decided to do a tier list. I've decided to rank the different replacement solutions in a tier list to compare them to the actual current situation with solo standard. I've made a list of 12 different solutions, in which some of them are different variants of the same solution, but we'll cross that hurdle once we get there. As you can see on the tier list, we have an S, A, B, C, D, and F. I measured the solutions up against the solution of keeping solo standard as it is, which is a D in my book. This means that everything in F is worse than solo standard, and everything above is positive to various degrees. The first 4 solutions are different variants of introducing team mode. I'll go through the difference between them once we start putting them into the tier list. Next up is solo 2v2, 4v4, 5v5, This one is a little interesting. It's moving Rumble from extra modes to the competitive tab to allow a new extra modes. Then we have Rocket Labs as a competitive playlist, like all the Rocket Labs maps. Then we have non-standard maps, which is basically a lot of the time the same as Rocket Labs, but with some small difference, which I will explain as I rank these two. At last, we have the 4v4 and 5v5 big map, or on a large map, I guess is the better way to say it. And these I'll explain once I get there what I really mean by a large map. But again, we'll look at it once we start ranking them. Before I begin, I should mention that these replacement ideas come from both Twitter, Reddit, and my own imagination. To be honest, those from my own imagination won't be doing too well, to be honest. But we'll take a look at it once we rate them. This is the first variant of team mode where the teams play single games. They queue up as a party, but they aren't really connected to a specific team, and they have an individual ranking. It's basically solo standard, but in a team format. I'm giving this a D. I can only see this being viable if you can't queue up as a full team in regular standard. Otherwise, it's an easy F, because nothing keeps players from just playing standard instead of this new team mode. It might be an improvement because you only need 2 parties to get a game, thereby faster queue times, but is there really that many full party teams compared to solo and dual queues? And will this not just deter people from queuing up as a full party and just solo and dual queue instead? There's some slight improvements, but also potential pitfalls, which is why I feel like it would be a sidestep from solo standard. Then we have the second team mode. And for the rest of these team mode solutions, I assume you can both queue in this new team mode, but also in standard as a full party, because these team mode ideas differentiate a lot from standard and again might deter people from queuing in teams, and that's not something Psyonix want to introduce into the game. A lack of partying. They had previously shown that a lot with a lot of new patches and ideas like the clubs, etc. So that's why I'm assuming that you'll still be allowed to queue standard even with this new mode. In this variant though, you still play the single games, but instead of having like an individual rank, you have a team rank with your teammates in that given section. The team rank is based on an invisible individual MMR, kinda like the one you see in the casual playlists. But first time players will enter this rank with no points, and will have to start from scratch like it is in any other mode. There'll be no subs, meaning that you can only play with those 2 players in that given team. And if you're playing with someone else, you need to create a new team with them. I'll give this a C. It has some promise, and it's the most controlled and simple way to make this format work, but it's still very complex and hard to know how you're gonna make this team-oriented logic work in a game like Rocket League. Having to play with the same players is also a tough restriction, which makes it really good team mode for those 3-man lobbies that always queue together, but really rough for everyone else. Therefore, I put it in C. Now we have the third variant, and it's much easier to explain than the second one. It's basically the same as the second one, but in this case, I'm allowing some subs in there as well. So instead of having these teams of 3 players locked in, you can have 4 or 5 players in these teams as well. And this one I'm gonna rate rather quickly as well. It's an F. And it's an F because there's something called boosting. And I feel like if you allow subs in this kind of format, it makes it a lot easier for boosting to occur, because Now you can actually rank up people without having them play. They just need to be a sub for the team. And even if you make some sort of requirement that the subs need to play 10 games or something to get the rewards, it will still make it a lot easier for a booster to boost someone. Therefore, it's a straight F for me. The last variant of team mode is basically like the second one, but instead of playing single games, you play full best of 5 series. I kinda like this, but I highly doubt it would be very popular in the general Rocket League community. One of the best things about Rocket League compared to other popular games like CSGO and Dota 2 is that the games are so quick. Making a series format turns Rocket League into a longer affair and a more competitive one of nature. That will appeal to some, but turn others away from it as well. Therefore, I'll rate it a D. As I said, I kinda like the idea, but also I think a lot of people won't like that change. So, for me, it's a D. Now we move away to something different. Solo 2v2. It makes more sense than solo standard, because duos are more popular than standard in general, and therefore you could expect more solo queues from 2v2 than 3v3 players. On top of that, you would only need 4 individual searches compared to the 6 from solo standard. I rate it a C though. It has some positives compared to solo standard, but it still has some of the same issues I've talked about earlier with story standard. The nature of making a playlist exclusive to solo queuing but not changing anything else about it is stale, boring, and doesn't bring anything new to the game, except slower queue times overall. Therefore, it's a C. So, now moving on to 4v4. This one I like a lot. I know some people are gonna disagree heavily with this, but I would love to see them introduce 4v4 as a ranked playlist. I haven't played too much 4v4 myself, but I think it fits thematically perfectly with the rest of the playlists. 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, and now 4v4. Its only downfall is the gameplay within. Will it be fun to play 4v4? I think that if it becomes a competitive playlist, a lot more people will explore it, me inclusive. 1v1, 2v2, and 3v3 have very different metas, and I think 4v4 would have its own as well. Will it be a fun way to play competitively? Hard to tell, but it's decently popular as a casual playlist, around 2 to 3 times the players of solo standard when I checked it the last time, so can't be that bad. It's therefore an A for me. If I place them by heart, this would be a certain S, because this is probably the one I want to see the most in the game, but I also have to recognize there are some notable questions mark around how popular it would be for the general player base, and there is a real risk that it will be very, very boring and no one will play it. That's why it's an A. So, moving to the next one. Ranked 5v5, I guess I should call it. I don't know what I would call this game mode if it. What's after Chaos? Armageddon? I'm not really sure, but basically it means more cars on the pitch than in 4v4. And this one is pretty easy to rate. Of course, this is my own imagination. I didn't really read anyone suggesting this, and that's probably for a reason. I put it in F at least. Because if you are gonna go with a new competitive playlist, of course go with 4v4. No reason to go with 5v5. It doesn't flow thematically, as I said before. And it's not been tested at all. That's probably a reason it's not even a casual playlist in the game, I guess. So yeah, F to 5v5. The next one is weird to rate. To me, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I really want to see new extra modes. Like, I'm a big fan of extra modes in general, but moving Rumble to competitive is, for me, not really logical. It doesn't really make sense, since Rumble, of course, has some similarities to the general way of playing Rocket League, But when you have all of these mutators, I don't really feel like it's a competitive mode anymore. It's a fun mode, mostly. And that's why it's a part of extra modes, I guess. That's why I'll put it as an F, purely because I don't feel like Rumble belongs in the competitive playlist. Now we're down to four solutions, and there's some holes, and I'll be honest, some of these four solutions will fill those holes. So, what is better than 4v4 for the competitive playlists? This is it. This is the playlist. This is probably not my favorite idea, but it is the idea I feel like would do the most for the competitive playlists. It is reintroducing Rocket Labs as a competitive playlist, not something hidden away in the caverns that you can only play with custom lobbies, etc. Make it public and make it competitive. I think that could kind of form a new kind of player base because Rocket Labs has a lot of fans in the first place. If you go on Twitter, you'll see a lot of disdain after removing Rocket Labs, and there's still occasionally some posts talking about how they miss Rocket Labs. I feel like the best way to reintroduce it is by reintroducing it as a competitive playlist. Whether that is 2v2 or 3v3 is a big question. I can see positives for both of them, as 2v2 has a larger player base and therefore more players to grab from when it comes to getting numbers to the playlist. But on the other hand, I feel like 3v3 is where the Rocket Lab maps really shine overall. So it's a really interesting dilemma. Anyway, I feel like this is such a good idea that I'm gonna put it in S. If I did it by heart, I would probably switch around these two, the 4v4 and Rocket Labs, but my logic says that Rocket Labs would be more popular than 4v4 as a game mode, and therefore I nudged 4v4 down to an A, because it also has some negatives. I don't feel like Rocket Labs has any negatives at all. The only negative is that people don't like playing non-standard maps, but I feel like the main issue with non-standard maps back then was that you couldn't control whether you played non-standard maps or not. They just got kind of randomly mixed in between. I feel like if you separate it, I feel like a lot more people actually wanna play non-standard maps. So moving on to non-standard maps, this is basically like the Rocket Labs playlist with the fact we're playing non-standard maps, but it has a lot less maps to choose from, and it's skinned like the regular Rocket League maps, like the casual playlists. So basically we have the old Wasteland, we have the old Starbar Base Arc, we have the old Neo Tokyo, etc. And I'm placing this in B. So what's the difference? Why do I feel like non-standard maps compared to Rocket Labs is such a bad idea? Or it's not really a bad idea, it's just not as good. Well, basically it's because I feel like that would create a lot of confusion. If you in one playlist like 3v3 standard, you get Neo Tokyo, you basically have a plain map. Then if you queue up in 3v3 non-standard maps, you get a totally different playing experience. It's the same skin, but way different maps. Especially for new players, this could be really, really confusing. That's why I'm rating it a B, because there are some design issues with it compared to Rocket Labs, where the maps are visually very different from regular Rocket League maps. And I like that. I like that a lot. Therefore, non-standard maps, it's a B. Still in front of solo 2v2 in my opinion, but below 4v4. Now we have the two last playlists that I'm considering for this tier list. Basically with pretty much the same idea, but with a small difference in the amount of players. But let me first clarify what I mean by a larger map. Basically I mean a map that's about 50% bigger than the current one. It would have like the same boost pattern, perhaps more boost, but again, let's just say same boost pattern, just to make it as simple as possible. It's a big change, and we don't really have that much evidence whether it would be a good change or not. We don't really know how the gameplay would evolve. Like it's a big risk is what I'm trying to say. If you test it really well and you optimize it and optimize boost patterns to kind of create an interesting gameplay, I feel like they could be really fresh and could be a good kick into the way we look at Rocket League. And therefore, I'm rating this a C. As I said, some really big risks in adding a mode like this without proper research and testing. But again, if you optimize it, I feel like this could be a C with the 4v4 on a large map. Reason why it's all the way down a C is I feel like why would you do a 4v4 on a larger map if you can just do 4v4 in the regular map? I feel like that works a lot better, just keeping it in the regular map. Thematic, it fits better. It's much easier for Psyonix to implement it, and it just has a better use in general, in my opinion, than 4v4 on a large map. The last solution is the 5v5 big map. I placed this by mistake, so I am right now floating it in the air between the options I'm considering. Will it be D, C, or B? Well, compared to the 4v4 big map, I feel like 5v5 on a larger map makes more sense in general, so I'm placing it in B. So why did I decide to place it in B? Well, basically I feel like if you're going with the large map, I feel like 5v5 make more sense. You're not gonna end up with some issue where you both have a regular 4v4 map and then also have a large 4v4 map. That might cause some confusion. On top of that, I feel like as long as you can make parties of 5 in Rocket League, it also creates some patterns over to other really big games like CSGO, like Valorant, like Dota 2, etc. A lot of these games where perhaps full party could consider coming to Rocket League, but right now if they do that, they can only play at maximum 4v4, so that means one can't play the game. In this case, if we have like a 5v5 mode, a lot of players from those other games could come over, play Rocket League, and play as their full squad still. I think it's something to consider, and to me that's the edge that knocks this up at B instead of C, on top of the obvious confusion a 4v4 big map and 4v4 playlist could provide. So this was my list of possible solo standard replacements. I hope you got inspired in thinking about what we should do about solo standard. You might not even think we need to do anything about solo standard, and that's fair enough. In my opinion, the competitive Rocket League playlist could use a bit of boost. It's getting kind of stale. And this was, in my opinion, the best options. Rocket Labs 4v4, I would be all in for those. And if you don't agree, that's fair enough. It's opinion based in the end. I try to think as objectively as possible towards what Psyonix could possibly introduce and how much success it would be if Psyonix introduced it, but there will always be some kind of bias in these lists, so I don't expect everyone to agree. But nevertheless, if you liked it, let me know. If you disagree or agree, comment why you agree or disagree with me, and subscribe if you want more content like this. Make sure to tune in, and guess that was all. Break out.